Well,
Recording in progress.
Cleopatra, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us today. It's an absolute honor having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Now, I had a chance to sit down and watch the film, and I've got to say, congratulations. I thought this was an absolutely amazing film, so congratulations on your performance.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your character of M. For all of the listeners out there who haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, tell us a little bit about your character and how you approached playing this character.
Yeah, well, so I play M. Foster. She's married to James Foster, played by Alexander Skarsgård, and she is the daughter of a wealthy mogul of publishing. And, she goes on this vacation with her husband at a rather stale time in their relationship. And when she and him break the rules and leave the resort, they get into an accident and find themselves in a whole lot of mysterious, hedonistic troubles. Basically, my approach to playing M, was I based her on some Melbourne sort of socialites that I had come across over the years, growing up partially in Melbourne, and just the idea of her being the daughter of someone very, very wealthy, and the idea that he didn't want her to marry a poor writer, and that's exactly what she's done. She also describes her dad as a monster, and you just get the element that there's some daddy issues there, and she's now that's all worn off, and she and James are face to face with the realities of their relationship, and so that's sort of where it all jumps off.
How much backstory about M did you have to work with as well? Of course, like you said, there was a lot there that you were able to play with that's in the film, but were you given much of a backstory for her character as well?
Well, that was something that Brandon and I worked on together. So when he cast me, she became Australian, and oftentimes I'm not always playing Australian, but he was like, no, I think it's great if she's Australian, and let's just say she's from Melbourne, and we decided on that together. And I knew that her dad was a wealthy publishing mogul, but together we've sort of thought about archetypes for that, like sort of Rupert Murdoch type characters, and then I was able to fill in all the blanks about the specificity to do with growing up in Melbourne, and also being biracial, but also part of this like elite community, and like maybe what that would have been like. All of that sort of played into the way I played M.
Did you get a little bit of national pride when he said you get to play an Australian? Was that something where you were like, yay, that's a little bit different?
Yeah, no, it's nice. I mean, look, I played an Australian on The Last Man on Earth for 4 years, and that was really fun, particularly because that was, comedy and like very like sort of fast-paced shooting schedule. So it's always nice to get to play Australian. And it did bring this sort of international vibe to the film, which is sort of, it's apt.
Yeah.
We're all from like different places, so yeah, it was cool.
Now, as you said, the film does get into some very, very deep territory. What were your first thoughts when you sat down and read the script for the first time?
Well, I was already a fan of Brandon's, so I knew to expect something like a little different, a little off-center for sure. I was really, really excited to get into this script. Even just the title alone with his name attached, I was just really, really into it. And right away, as as someone who's seen it, that the opening scene is this really interesting back and forth over a black screen that's quite abstract language and poetic and really unusual and interesting, and that pulled me in right away as an actor you know when something's unusual and people aren't speaking the way that they normally speak. And that was definitely obvious when it came to reading that first scene. And then as it went on, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I have to be a part of this.
You mentioned that you were a fan of Brandon's before the film. Tell us a little bit about what you've loved about his work over the years.
Well, I think Brandon is, he's great with original sci-fi, and it's quite intangible, actually. Now that we've been promoting this movie and I've had the opportunity to talk about Brandon as an artist, what I realize more and more is that it's kind of hard to articulate exactly what is so special about him.
Yeah.
Though it's abundantly clear that he is very special. You could say that his background in visual effects, perhaps his use of it because he's done it before he was a director, perhaps like that has something to do with it. Just the way his brain works, I love it. But I think, that intangibility, that thing, that's what makes the best artists, so great. He has a way of like delving into the psyche and then expressing it through genre, through sci-fi, which is like, really, I think, satisfying and it's fun and cool, but it's also like saying something, it's speaking to something.
Yeah. So what was that like when you were first approached about doing this film? Like, did your heart skip a little bit of a beat when you realized that it was a Brandon Cronenberg film?
I mean, in an excited way, because I was a fan. I was like, heck yeah, like, let's get into it. Absolutely. I wasn't scared at all. I was deeply intrigued and, just couldn't wait to get from one page to the next, really.
How did you find working with Brandon? Like, does it change a little bit sometimes if you're an actress and you're going into a film with a director that you really respect? Does it change the way that you approach the film at all, and what was it like working with him day in and day out?
Well, I think whether or not you are familiar with their work or not, if you're saying yes to something, it's because there's something about what they plan to do with the film that you respect. So that respect should already really be there. But it was, with Brandon, it's just really easy because he's a very low-key, Canadian guy. He can be quite self-deprecating. He's not coming in, like, I'm Brandon Cronenberg. He's like, I'm Brandon Cronenberg, I'm an artist, and let's try to tell the best story we can. And you can you can tell that he really, really cares. That just makes things really easy right away because you feel like you're allowed to make mistakes and you feel like you're in good hands.
Now, you got to work with some absolutely amazing castmates as well. Tell us a little bit about what it was like working with Alexander and Mia.
Well, it was great. I mean, we got to shoot this movie in Budapest, Hungary, and in Croatia, and like actually live in a resort in Croatia. So we had a lovely time. And yeah, it was really cool to see both of those actors go to the lengths that they go to that's asked of them in this film and with those characters. So with M being the only person sort of reacting normally to everything that's going on, it was really cool to see both of them just get to take it, all the way to the other end of the spectrum. But yeah, it was an absolute pleasure front to back.
I'm sure a lot of young actors and actresses out there will be interested in the answer to this question. The relationship between James and M, did you get much time to work with Alexander before the start of the shoot to work on that relationship and what kind of relationship James and M would have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that was like my number one thing when I arrived in Hungary and I had a face-to-face meeting with Brandon as opposed to over Zoom. I was like, "Where's Alex? We need to sit down and at least get familiar with each other enough." But also, there, and it's very much in the script, but we also discussed this with Brandon, you'll notice they don't hold hands when they walk around. They're not particularly lovey-dovey or expressive towards each other. They're at a very stale part of their relationship. So while Alex and I certainly needed to bond just so that we had that trust to make mistakes in front of each other and to try things, which was easy to do because he's lovely and great to get along with. But also, it's not like we were playing a couple that were like super in love as well. So us getting to know each other at the same time as playing a married couple sort of made sense in that way.
You mentioned a little bit about the resort, but what was it like working in Hungary and Croatia on this film as well?
Well, it was great. I mean, that's one of the great beauties of my job and of my life is that I get to travel to these places that I might not normally get to go to and see it through, a certain kind of lens. I'm someone who I like to travel on my own, and it's always nice to touch down in a new country you've never been to, and you're pretty much on your own, but you know that there's like a whole production office that you can call if you need anything. That's always a nice feeling. But it definitely added to the authenticity and the feeling that we were in this fictional country of Latolka, because it's sort of a mashup of different ideas for Eastern European countries. So it was nice to be in two different European countries while we were filming it.
Definitely. Cleopatra, we are running out of time very, very quickly. So just to wrap up very quickly, what would you like to say to people who are about to go out to cinemas this weekend and watch Infinity Pool?
I would say that the movie is just so wild, it's so crazy, it's visually stunning, it's surprisingly funny, it's absurd, it's original sci-fi, and the less they know the better. Just go in ready to have their minds blown.